Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, we are going to go back through, we're going to talk about all the action that happened in day one of CDL Florida, and we're going to predict what I feel will happen going into Saturday or day two. Saturday's schedule will take us all the way up to the semifinals, so let's go ahead, let's start reviewing the action that happened in the first set of matches on Friday. So we'll start over in Group B because that's where the tournament started. We started here with London and Paris, and that's pretty much how we expected it to go, right? I will say that this was probably a little bit closer than I thought it would be, especially the search and destroy. They had to clutch up in that map too in order to win that search and destroy. So they looked a little bit beatable in search and destroy, right? When it came down to domination, they lost that on Gunrunner by 3. Then after that, they turned it around and they just absolutely obliterated them in the last hard point of that matchup. So Atlanta went through, which went ahead and put Paris down into the losers bracket. Second matchup of the day was OGLA versus London, and this was super intriguing. So I predicted this one correctly. The right side of my bracket was great. We'll talk about the left side in a second. But there was a couple things that came through here. First of all, London has been playing really well in hardpoints, and they showed it against OGLA. Those hardpoints, they won by like 60, both of them. 65 and 55 were the victories in the hardpoints. So London came through. They looked like they are beatable. The first search and destroy, they kind of got pounded. The domination, they lost by 50. That really wasn't close at all. And then when it came down to Piccadilly search, they were able to clutch up and win that 6-4. But the hard points is really what carried them. And that makes for an interesting matchup with Atlanta, but we'll talk about in a minute. With Optic, the question for me that I had going into this matchup was how would Chino play? And I don't feel like he really gave them much more than JCap could, right? I felt like his output was probably pretty similar to what JCap is capable of doing. Really what OGLA needs is a Slayer from the SMG. They need an Envoy. They need an Illy. They need a Simp and a BZ. They need a player like that. And obviously that's easier said than done, right? Because those guys are obviously the best in the world. But I was hoping Chino would give them a little bit more. He did have a couple flashes where he had like a 3-piece here, a 3-piece there. So he showed that he belongs there, right? It's not like he can't play. It's not like he was a sight for sore eyes or a sore thumb or whatever. I mean, he looked like he could play there. It just wasn't what I was hoping for. So on the right-hand side of the bracket for Group B, we correctly guessed this. Now let's go over to the left side because that we did not get correctly. So first matchup, we had New York versus Toronto. This one started the hard point. It's kind of what we thought the series would be, right? They came out, they won 250 to 214. Even though that score line was kind of close, the match really wasn't all that close. And we just figured, or I just figured that with Mac, the addition of Mac, what he has brought to the table, how well they've been playing, Attach, Zuma, everybody has been picking up their games, that they would just go ahead. And I figured at least in the respawns, they would definitely outclass Toronto here. And that's how it started. When it got to the search and destroy, Toronto blew them out 6-2. Remember back to the beginning of the year, Toronto was one of the best search teams through the first couple tournaments. After like the first or second weekend, they were like 5-0 in search. One of the only teams that did that well. So that has carried on a little bit. I figured they would have a little bit. They would put up a little bit of a fight when it came to search. But then in the domination, they ended up clutching up. They ended up winning that domination by 2. And I think that domination might have taken a little bit out of the sails of New York because when it came down to that hard point, they won that hard point by 70. Again, that really wasn't ever all that close at all. And Toronto clutched up. So if we're going through and moving people around, we can take Toronto. Let's move them up top. And then let's take New York and move them down to the losers bracket. I was shocked by this. This is one that I felt like was probably pretty easy to call, and it ended up not being. As we move on to the last matchup of the day, we had Florida versus Minnesota. For me, every time these two teams were to play, I feel like it's a toss-up, right? You could flip a coin, and that would be the end result. The way Florida ended up winning that event that they just won, I just felt like some of that would carry over to this tournament. And that's not what happened. So they came out, they got blown away. Well, I guess not blown away, but they lost by 40 in the hard point. After that, they definitely got blown away in the search, lost 6-2. Then even though the domination was closer, they still ended up dropping that. And a lot of people picked Minnesota here, which I said in my video yesterday that I could see this one going either way. I don't ever really feel comfortable picking against Minnesota because they clutch up all the time. They're so consistent. They just show up ready to play, and that's the team that they are, and I love that about them. But it is what it is, right? They came, they showed up. So Minnesota and Florida will switch. Let's go ahead. Let's put Minnesota up top. And now we have the bracket set for day 2. So day 2 will take us all the way up through group play and into semifinals. So let's start on the right-hand side of the bracket. We'll go all the way through the right, all the way through the left, and then we'll make our predictions moving towards semifinals. Again, let me know down below in the comments what your predictions are. A lot of people picked Minnesota. That was the one that stood out for me yesterday. That was different from what I picked. So I love going through and reading what you guys pick. Make sure you leave comments. But with Atlanta versus London, this is actually a little bit tough for me. And the reason being is that Atlanta looks beatable in their hard points, and London has been looking phenomenal in their hard points, and London search is pretty good, right? I would definitely say London in search is definitely in the top 6 teams that are in our CDL. So I feel like this is a lot closer than people think. I'm still going to go with Atlanta to win this just because I feel like they have the clutch factor. I feel like they've shown that they can perform when they're in this scenario, and London really hasn't shown that yet. Once London gets to like a semifinal or a grand final, then we might be able to talk a little bit differently. But for now, I'm going to go ahead. I still have more confidence in Atlanta, which will take London and they'll put them in the losers bracket final here. Losers bracket semifinal of Group B for group play is Paris versus OGLA, and this is one that I struggle with just because the addition of Chino didn't look that great. I know we already talked about it, but I'm just not, I don't know, I'm not sold yet on OGLA as much as I want to be with all the talent they have. Dashy looked phenomenal with the sniper rifle in his hands yesterday, especially playing Search and Destroy. But even with that, even though I'm not sold, I still think they have enough firepower to beat Paris. So we're going to take OGLA. We're going to put them through to the losers bracket final of Group B. Paris is going to go home 0-2. I think that Paris is a team that can turn things around. I wish that this was on land because when the LAN events finished, I had Paris like in the top 6, right? 5, 6, somewhere right around there, along with the Florida and the Minnesota and the Londons of the world. I feel like all those teams are really close, but now that it's not on land, I feel like they're falling a little bit further apart from everybody else. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Group B finals is going to be London versus OGLA, and even though the first matchup was so close, I just can't see London losing the hard points the way that they're playing right now. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Atlanta. Now, when it comes to Search and Destroy, they've shown that they're playing really well in that, but with the sniper action from Dashy and the way Slasher's been playing at that AR position, they've shown that Optic has shown that they can play really well there also. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it to London. I think London's going to go through. So London's going to be the second team that goes through. So Atlanta's going to make it out of winners for Group B. London's going to make their way through the losers bracket and come out on the other side, and they're going to be the second team from Group B. That's how I'm personally feeling. I wouldn't be shocked if it's OGLA, but I would feel good for London if they're able to make it to that semifinal, just because I think that they're capable of being the team that can take that next step. I want to see them be the team that can take that next step. I feel like with the addition of Shawnee, he's been playing so well, so many clutch plays. And then, of course, the Twins, they always play out of their minds. They're so consistent. I just want to see them. I feel like they're right on the cusp, right? Now show it to us. Show us that you can make it that far. On the opposite side, let's make our way through Group A. So Toronto and Minnesota. Now that Minnesota has shown that they're playing well again, right? They've been a little bit inconsistent, but most of the time they're kind of the model of consistency when it comes to the Call of Duty League. And Toronto looked great, but I just don't have a ton of confidence in them yet. Toronto is, I don't want to say that they're similar to London for me, but I want to see them prove that they can make it somewhere before I put them through. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say Minnesota is going to win that, which is going to match them up with London in the semifinals. That'll take Toronto, and that'll put them as the first team into the losers bracket final for Group A. Let's talk about the losers bracket semi between New York and Florida. And this one, I feel like if this was on land, I would have so many different picks. But these are the two teams that I expected to be in the winners bracket finals for Group A, and they both kind of came up short, right? They didn't play how at least I expected them to play. You guys might have had a different bracket. But with this one, this is super tough for me because Florida definitely has an AR advantage here, right? I think everybody would be pretty safe in saying that. But I feel like, at least over the last few weeks, New York has shown that they probably have, with the addition of Mac and how Zuma and all those guys have been playing, they probably have the advantage at the SMG position. So this is a toss-up. I think a lot of this will depend on the maps, right? What happens in the bans? If are a lot of the maps that are played, is it like St. Petrograd where it's a little bit more AR heavy, or are you playing like Hackney Yard a lot? So those maps are more SMG dependent. With this, I still have a little bit more confidence in New York right here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put New York through. I just don't feel it from Florida. Even though they've won an event, they've been playing so well. I don't know. I'm just not sold on them. So that's going to go 0-2 for Florida, which will put New York through. So now we have Toronto and New York in that final. And even though, guys, I watched every second of this matchup. And even with Toronto beating New York the first time, I just don't feel it, right? I can't explain what it is. I just don't have the confidence that Toronto can come out and they can beat New York in a loser's bracket final like this. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put New York through. I think that Toronto is starting to show us things, but I just don't think that they're there yet. It's just how I'm feeling at the moment. I feel like they're going to be overwhelmed, at least in this one, by the pressure from New York's SMGs. And I could be totally wrong. Maybe I'm completely off base and New York comes out and they lay an egg again. Heck, they could lose to Florida, right? I don't think that would shock anybody if New York went 0-2. But I'm just starting to feel a little bit more confidence in them. The consistency is getting a little bit better, even though that they failed against Toronto. So we'll see what happens there. So for my semifinal matchup, we have Atlanta versus New York against Minnesota versus London. That's kind of how I'm feeling at the moment. We'll see what happens. I can't wait to watch all of this play out. I love these little mini tournament settings where we can see each of these teams fight through their brackets and their pool plays and take us to semifinals. So with that, guys, again, any comments, let me know what you feel about these predictions. I'm really interested to see what you guys think differently, especially potentially that New York versus Florida matchup. Some people could be a little bit different there. I'm also interested to see if you guys have a little bit more confidence in Toronto than I have. So any comments on this stuff, make sure you put it down below. If you're new around here and you like these sort of prediction videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's video will break down how Saturday went. Then it'll predict the winners and who is going to end up winning this thing for Sunday. So make sure you leave a like before you head on the way. It really helps out the channel. And with that, guys, thank you so much. Enjoy watching day 2 of CDL Florida. I will see you tomorrow morning to preview day 3. We'll see you.